actually have adopted or are adopting Agile development paradigms, and we've been able to work with a number of them on how to do security in that particular environment. And so we've just come up with some ideas that we're trying with some of our clients, and we wanted to share those with you and also get your feedback, because I can imagine there's a few people in the room that might be doing Agile development or are thinking about it. So I'm sort of curious about your ideas as well. And there's a few other people in the room who have been doing some research on this as well. Is Johan in the room somewhere? I can't see because of the lights, but is Johan Peters in the room somewhere? Anyway, I've read some of his papers, and some of his ideas are match mine, so those are reflected there. And we also have some differences of opinion that I don't think are major, but I'll discuss those as well, just so you can hear alternate viewpoints and some ideas as well. So Agile has this nice manifesto, and if you heard Jeff Williams' keynote yesterday morning, he was sort of lamenting the fact that Agile is having so much more impact on how people develop software as compared to how much impact Owasp or even the entire security community is having on how people do security. And that's not anything bad in the sense of what Agile is doing. Obviously, they're having great success because they're saying, look, there's been a lot of development paradigms we've had for a long time, particularly these sort of heavy waterfall models. They just aren't working for us. And we need to change the way we build software so it's much quicker, much faster time to market, much simpler for the developers and more importantly, the customers to work on how they build software. So they have this manifesto that talks about, these things are important, but so is this. These things are important, but so is this. But we value the things, on one side much more important than the ideas that are on the other side. So the whole Agile mindset is to focus on these issues that are important. Now, some of the underlying principles of Agile is test-driven development, pair programming, and focusing on little things and doing little things, getting them in front of the customer, then getting feedback and going on and improving them or changing them or what have you. And that's sort of the focus of doing little tiny sprints. So a number of our clients are doing sprints that are like 3 to 4 weeks at a time is the cycle of their sprint, and they'll plan 18 sprints or 24 sprints in a year's time frame or whatever that happens to be. So before I move on here, I'm just curious about how many people are actually doing Agile development in the room. Awesome. All right. So you guys know probably a lot more about this than I do to some degree. So my next question for those of you who are doing Agile is, how many of you guys are really doing test-driven development? Okay, so that's an interesting statistic, right? So if I'm doing the math right, it looked like 20% maybe. So, I mean, Agile is useful in a lot of ways, but there's obviously some concerns about Agile because it is so fast that it might have an adverse effect on quality, right? So one of the things that Agile has tried to say is, like, we're going to do test-driven development. That's going to really help us articulate what we're trying to build before we build it. And then when we build it, we can verify that what we built actually works. And so that is a significant factor in trying to improve the quality of Agile software. So that quality factor that can be built into Agile can help us when we move to security. So there's not necessarily a clear opposite between Agile and security. It's the speed of development that causes us to be concerned about security when we build software in an Agile way. But if we're focused on quality as part of the process, and we have security be part of our concerns, then theoretically we should be able to build secure, high-quality software. And so we're going to just talk about some of the ideas that we have to layer on security in a way that gets us to build secure, high-quality functional software without fundamentally breaking the Agile paradigm. And so at the end, and I don't think this will take that long to sort of lay out the ideas, hopefully we'll have some time for questions and answers, and you guys can say, that was a great idea, or that was a stupid idea, or this is what we're seeing in our environment, so we can try to figure this out. So our goal, of course, from a security perspective is to gain assurance. In other words, that we have the right security functionality, that it's high quality, in other words, that it works, that it's being used everywhere it needs to be, and that it's actually being used the way it's supposed to be used, right? So can we get assurance out of Agile development in terms of security? Well, if you're doing test-driven development, there's a significant focus on high assurance because of the test-driven process. Now, this quote from Johan, I added the functional quote in there because that wasn't directly in the quote, but they're focusing on functional assurance because Agile development primarily focuses on functional user stories. In other words, these are the functions that we want to make available to our users so that this application can accomplish its mission. So that's probably the only reason why it's focused on just functional, is that's tend to be what users want. What do users want? They want functionality, right? So when you go to them and ask them what they want, they primarily tell you about functionality. So because Agile is focused on building what the stakeholder wants, and they don't either know enough to ask for security, or they don't care, well, then you're not going to build a secure application because they haven't asked you to. And so one of the things I'm going to suggest later is we need to help them. We need to encourage them to include security. Now, we can't just steamroll over the stakeholder and say, oh, I'm an expert, this is exactly what you have to do, and oh, by the way, it's going to cost you twice as much, and what have you, because that's not going to work. But I think we need to encourage them. We clearly need to involve them so they understand the risks we're facing and the cost or the schedule impacts it's going to introduce to address those risks. And then we can prioritize the security tasks along with the functional tasks to decide what's important. And functionality might win early on during the early phases of the sprint as we want to prove the application. But over time, as you get more and more of the functionality done, then you're going to say, well, I can't deploy this yet because it's missing these core critical security functions. We got to get those stories implemented. That's where the trade-offs start coming in. So, and I have a number of ideas on how to make that, as efficient as we can get. So, traditional security, which has been around for ever and ever, and I came from that school back in the 90s, was the DoD and big software project waterfall model where we do massive requirements and design and blah, 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 right? And obviously that's what the Agile movement is sort of rebelling against because it's too heavyweight, too slow, what have you. So we got to change from that kind of security model to a model that fits within Agile. So that's what we're going to try to figure out. So this is a depiction of the Agile model. So the way Agile works is you start off with some early processes where you think about sort of the high-level goals of the system and the core user stories at the highest level. So sometimes people call that sprint zero, where they're trying to figure out, okay, what are the main goals we're going to try to build, and which ones are more important, so we need to focus on those first. And then you start going through these various spirals where you build the next few most important stories. Then you get them in front of some early adopters to show them what it's going. And then while they're looking at it, you might do some QA and some tests and what have you. And then you're going to go, well, is this good enough, ready to actually go to deployment? If yes, then we're going to maybe do some more detailed testing just to make sure it's good before we release it. Or if not, we're going to go around and around. So a lot of times you go around and around the cycle 3, 4, 5 times before a new release comes out, or you might go through it 18 times or whatever. It just depends on your environment. So the question is, how do we layer